I used to think my daughter was simply greedy, but that changed the night I heard her negotiating a price on the phone, as if she were selling me off by the pound. By the next morning, I had sold my $3 million beach house to a stranger. However, the real blow was not the sale itself, but the fact that the property she believed was her birthright had become the very trap she walked into. My name is Evelyn Hartwell. If you are listening to this expecting a story about a helpless widow hoodwinked by a charismatic con artist, you are in the wrong place. I spent 30 years working for the Northgate Assurance Bureau here in Pittsburgh. My job was simple. I looked at a disaster waiting to happen and I calculated the cost. People think grief makes you blind. For me, it just made the math clearer. I am 58 years old. I did not win the lottery. I did not inherit a fortune from a distant uncle. My husband and I built our life on compound interest and skipped vacations. We ended up with two things that mattered. One was a sprawling beach house down in Isle of Palms, South Carolina, currently valued at roughly $3 million. The other was a small cabin tucked away in the mountains of West Virginia, a place to hide from the world. The deed structure for both was complicated. That was intentional. Nobody in my family knew exactly whose name was on which piece of paper. Not even my daughter. Sloane is 32. She is beautiful in that way that requires high maintenance and better lighting. She has always been good at being looked at. Since she was a teenager, her favorite phrase has been, "But Mom, everything you do is for me eventually." Right. She said it like a mantra. After her father died 2 years ago, that mantra changed. She became attentive, aggressively so. She started sending me articles about dementia. She insisted I install safety apps on my phone that tracked my location. She asked about my passwords, claiming it was for my digital legacy. Then came the questions about the will. Then she met Carter Vance. I agreed to host their engagement dinner at my home because it seemed like the polite thing to do. Carter was handsome, I suppose. If you like men who smile with their teeth, but not their eyes. He started calling me Mom within 10 minutes of walking through my front door. "Mom, you really have such a lovely home," Carter said, pouring himself a drink from my husband's reserve collection without asking. It is a shame to let all this equity just sit here doing nothing. It made my skin crawl. Later that evening, he started holding court at the dinner table, talking loudly about his company going public. He used all the buzzwords. He talked about leverage and synergy and the upcoming IPO. He sounded like he had memorized a textbook, but had never actually run a business. "Who is handling the underwriting?" I asked him over the appetizers. "And which firm is doing the legal audit?" He froze. It was a micro-expression, a flash of panic that lasted less than a second, but I saw it. "Oh, well, the team handles the boring details. Evelyn," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "I focus on the vision. A real CEO knows who his auditor is." That was the first crack in the glass. The second one happened at 2 a.m. I woke up because I was thirsty. The house was silent, except for a rhythmic whirring coming from the study downstairs. It was the printer. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. The living room was a mess of wedding samples, ribbons, cardstock, fonts. Sloane and Carter had left everything spread out on the coffee table after they went to the guest room. I walked over to the printer. It had just finished spitting out a document. I picked it up. The paper was still warm. It was not a wedding invitation. It was a high-resolution photocopy of the deed to my beach house in South Carolina, and right underneath it, buried in a stack of RSVP samples, was a power of attorney form with my name typed at the top. The atmosphere at brunch the next morning felt less like a family meal and more like a hostage negotiation. The air conditioning was humming, but the room felt suffocatingly hot. Sloane pushed a piece of melon around her plate, her eyes darting between me and Carter. I knew that look. It was the same look she used to give me when she wanted a new car in high school, a mix of entitlement and rehearsed desperation. "Mom, Carter and I have been thinking," Sloane started, her voice tight. "For the wedding. We don't want a blender or a check. We think it is time to talk about the beach house." I took a sip of black coffee. "What about it?" "We want the deed," she said, the words rushing out. "It is a family legacy. It is worth. What, $3 million now? Carter says it is sitting there collecting dust. We deserve to manage it. It would be the perfect start for us." I set my cup down slowly. The porcelain made a sharp click against the saucer. "Sloane, that house is my retirement plan," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am happy to let you use it for the summer. I can even block off July entirely for you two." Sloane dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "You are so selfish," she hissed, her face flushing pink. "You act like you are going to live forever. You hold on to everything like it is oxygen." "Why can't you just trust me for once?" Carter reached over and placed his hand on hers. It was a performance. He looked at me with a practiced, condescending sympathy. "Evelyn, look, I know it is hard to let go," Carter said, his voice smooth like oil. "But in finance, we call this stagnant equity. You should be relaxing, not worrying about property taxes. If you transfer the title to us, we can use the house as collateral. I am setting up a family investment fund. We could leverage that $3 million into $10 million in 5 years." There it was. He did not want to live in the house. He wanted to mortgage it. He wanted to turn my sanctuary into a gambling chip. "I don't think so, Carter," I said. Sloane's eyes welled up with tears, real or fake. I could not tell any more. She reached into her purse and pulled out a framed photo of her father, setting it on the table between us. "Dad would have given it to me," she said, her voice trembling. "If he were here, he wouldn't make me beg. He loved me enough to want me to be successful. Why don't you?" The pain hit me in the chest like a hammer. She knew exactly where to strike. She was using my dead husband, the man who worked himself into an early grave to buy that house, as leverage to get a signature. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them both out. But the risk manager in my head took over. If I exploded now, they would shut down. I needed them to think they were winning. I took a deep breath, forcing my shoulders to relax. "You know, maybe you are right. I lied. Maybe I am being too rigid." Carter sat up straighter. The change in his posture was instant. "I need to go down there this weekend," I continued, watching his face closely. "The roof needs an inspection before I can make any big decisions. Let me go check on the maintenance. And when I get back, we will talk about the transfer." Carter's eyes literally sparked. It was a flash of pure greed, gone as quickly as it appeared. "That sounds very sensible." "Evelyn," he said, smiling, "take your time. We just want what is best for the family." That night, I sat in my bedroom with the door locked. I felt sick. I opened my laptop to check my bank balances, just a routine check I did every Sunday. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. "Request to change mailing address for statements." Pending? I froze. I had not requested an address change. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I clicked on the security settings. I scrolled down to the account recovery options. Someone had added a secondary phone number for two-factor authentication just 6 hours ago. I pulled out my phone and typed the number into my contacts search bar. I didn't need to search far. It was already saved in my phone. It was Carter's work cell number. He wasn't waiting for me to decide. He was already inside the walls. I did not scream when I found the tracking device. I did not throw the bag across the room. I simply sat on the floor of my bedroom with a seam ripper in my hand and surgically opened the silk lining of my favorite leather tote. I had felt a hard lump there 2 days ago, a lump that should not have been there. It was an AirTag. It was not registered to me. It was paired to a phone I did not recognize, likely a burner or a secondary device. This was not about helping an old woman find her keys. This was surveillance. I looked at the small white disc and felt a cold, metallic clarity wash over me. If they wanted to track me, I would let them track something. I wrapped the device in 3 layers of heavy-duty aluminum foil and shoved it inside an RFID blocking pouch I used for my passport. I drove 5 miles to the interstate truck stop. I found a rental moving truck with Ohio license plates idling while the driver bought coffee. I tossed the pouch into the open bed of the truck, right between a mattress and a box of lamps. By the time I got home, my dot on their map would be heading north at 70 miles an hour, while I sat safely in my kitchen in Pittsburgh. My phone rang at 6:45 the next morning. It was Sloan. Mom. Are you okay? Her voice was high, tight, with a panic that felt disproportionate for a Tuesday morning. Where? Where are you? I am at home. Sloan, I said, keeping my voice groggy. Why are you calling so early? The safety app says you are offline, she stammered. It says your last location was on the highway, and then nothing. I thought maybe you had an accident. Evelyn. Carter's voice suddenly boomed over the line. He was obviously listening on speakerphone. We are just worried. You know how spotty the service gets when you drive. Are you sure you didn't go for a drive last night? I am fine, I said. My phone must be acting up. I will restart it. I hung up and immediately opened my laptop. I did not restart anything. Instead, I logged into my primary banking portal. I bypassed the main dashboard and went straight to the security logs. I needed to see the digital footprint. There it was. Successful login. 3:14 in the morning. IP address location. Jacksonville. Florida. I have never been to Jacksonville. I do not know anyone in Jacksonville. But someone had logged into my account from there while I was asleep in Pennsylvania. Carter had mentioned a business partner in the South once, but he had never been specific. I picked up my landline and dialed a number I had not called in years. Marcia Keene was an old friend, a notary public who had seen every kind of family dispute imaginable. Marcia. I need to ask you something hypothetical, I said as soon as she picked up. If someone wanted to sell a property without the owner present, how hard is it to fake a power of attorney? Marcia was quiet for a long moment. Evelyn, that is a very specific question, she said slowly. It is funny you ask. I had a young woman call my office last week. She didn't give her name, but she was asking about the procedure for expedited signing for an elderly mother who, she claimed, was mentally slipping. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Did she sound like she was from Pittsburgh? I asked. She did. Marcia said. She had a very polished voice, like she was used to getting her way. I thanked her and hung up. I grabbed a legal pad and a pen. I started a list. Who knew the security code to the beach house, Sloane? Who knew where I kept the physical deeds, Sloane? Who knew the answers to my security questions? Like the name of my first pet or the street I grew up on, Sloane. I opened my email trash folder, next. Sometimes, when you sync accounts across devices, deleted items from one device still show up in the server trash for a few days. I scrolled past the junk mail and the newsletters until I saw it. A confirmation email from a real estate appraisal firm in Charleston. Appointment confirmed Tuesday, 10 a.m. Property, 14 Ocean Boulevard, Isle of Palms. Client Sloane Hartwell, family representative. She had not just asked for the house. She was already appraising it. She was selling me out before I was even dead. I stared at the screen, and for the first time since my husband died, I did not feel grief. I felt efficient. I closed the laptop. If they wanted a war, I would give them a masterclass. I did not call the police. That is what a victim does, and I was not a victim. I was a risk manager dealing with a liability. If I brought the authorities in now, Carter would spin a story about a misunderstanding. Or worse. He would claim he was helping a confused old woman manage her finances. The investigation would drag on for months, and during that time, my liquid assets would vanish into offshore accounts. No. I needed to let them think the door was still open while I quietly changed the locks. My first stop was the office of Diane Ketteridge, my estate attorney. Diane has been handling my affairs for 20 years. She does not hug people. She destroys them with paperwork. Diane. I need to restructure the holdings. I told her, sitting in her stiff leather chair. I want to move the Isle of Palms property into a blind trust effective immediately, and I want you to prepare a sales agreement. I am selling it. Diane raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. To whom? To an LLC that I control? I said, I want the asset liquid, but I want the paper trail to look like a standard market sale. If anyone checks the registry, I want them to see a sale pending to a third party. It needs to look real. Next was Leon Barrows. Leon is a forensic accountant who used to work for the IRS. He treats bank statements like crime scenes. I need you to go back 18 months. I instructed him. Look for the small stuff. Subscriptions, fees, test transactions. Anything under $50. They wouldn't start with the big wire transfers. They would test the fence first. Then came the physical surveillance. I retained a firm called Rook and Hallow Investigations. I gave them Carter's photo and his license plate number. I don't want him approached. I said, I just want to know who he meets when he thinks nobody is watching. If he buys a pack of gum, I want a receipt. Once the defense was in place, I planted the mine. I called Sloane later that afternoon. I made sure to sound frail. I let my voice tremble just a little, playing the part of the anxious widow they desperately wanted me to be. Sloane. Honey, I said into the receiver. I have been so worried lately. With all these break-ins on the news, I don't feel safe keeping the deeds here in Pittsburgh anymore. What do you mean? Mom, she asked. Her voice instantly sharpened, shedding the casual tone she had started with. I am going to take the small safe down to the beach house this weekend. I lied. I think I will feel better if the papers are locked away down there. Nobody would look for them in a vacation home. It is safer. There was a pause, a silence that was heavy with calculation. I could almost hear her covering the microphone to whisper to someone. That is a great idea. Mom, Sloane said, her voice dripping with false reassurance. You should definitely do that. Carter and I might even come down to help you settle in. You shouldn't be lifting heavy boxes alone. I hung up and immediately went to work on my digital fortress. I changed every password to a random string of 30 characters. I set up login alerts that would ping my phone the second anyone tried to access my accounts. I even created a new checking account with $5,000 in it, just enough to look tempting, and left the credentials slightly less secure than the others. It was a honeypot. 2 days later. Leon called me. We met in a diner halfway between our offices to avoid any digital snooping. You were right about the test transactions, Leon said, sliding a thick folder across the table. They started 6 months ago. Small amounts. $10 here, $20 there. Just checking to see if you noticed. But Evelyn, there is something else. He pointed to a column of data highlighted in yellow. These transfers were authorized via two-factor authentication, he explained, tapping the paper. The confirmation codes were sent to a mobile device. We traced the device ID. I looked at the number. I knew it by heart. It wasn't Carter's burner phone. It wasn't a cloned SIM card. That is Sloane's personal cell phone, I whispered, the air leaving my lungs. Leon nodded grimly. She isn't just looking the other way. Evelyn. She is clicking the approve button. I stared at the paper. My daughter wasn't being manipulated. She was the one holding the door open. Living with my daughter and her fiancé while plotting their downfall required a level of acting I did not know I possessed. I became the mother they wanted to see. I was soft, pliable, and slightly confused. I spent breakfast asking Sloane about floral arrangements for the wedding, nodding enthusiastically when she showed me centerpieces that cost more than my first car. Oh, Sloane, that shade of blush is just lovely, I told her, buttering my toast with a steady hand. You have such an eye for these things. I am just so glad I can help make this happen. Sloane beamed at me. It was the smile of a predator who thinks the trap has already snapped shut. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thanks, Mum. I knew you would understand eventually, she said. We just want everything to be perfect. While I was playing the role of the doting mother, my investigators were doing the real work. Rook and Hallow sent me a secure update at noon. Carter had been spotted at a roadside diner off the interstate, meeting with a man named Silas. My investigators ran a background check on Silas immediately. He had 2 prior convictions for real estate title fraud in Jacksonville. The transcript of their conversation, captured by a long-range directional microphone, was brief and chilling. I need the signature by Friday, or the deal with the developers falls through. Carter had said, just get the paper signed. I can handle the notarization stamp. Silas had replied, but if she wakes up and contests it, we are both going to prison. She won't contest it. She trusts us, Carter had assured him. Hearing strangers discuss my potential financial ruin was one thing. Hearing my daughter confirm it was another. Later that afternoon, I was walking past the guest room door when I heard Sloane on the phone. The door was cracked open just an inch. No, babe. Just do it how you planned, Sloane whispered. Her voice was impatient. My mum doesn't suspect a thing. She is totally focused on the wedding cake. Just get the papers ready. I stood in the hallway, my hand hovering over the doorknob. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out with a scoop. That single sentence hurt more than the death of my husband. Grief is a clean pain. Betrayal is a dirty, rotting wound. I walked away silently, retreating to my study before my legs gave out. I needed to accelerate the timeline. I walked into the living room that evening and clapped my hands together. "I have been thinking," I announced. "Since we are going to the beach house this weekend to put the deed in the safe, why don't we have a little family meeting down there? I invited a friend of mine. He is a financial consultant. I want him to look over the numbers so we can transfer the assets smoothly." Carter looked at Sloane, then back at me. "A consultant. Who is he? Just an old friend?" I said breezily. "His name is Leon. He is very good at tax minimization." Carter relaxed. He heard tax minimization and assumed I was trying to save them money. He had no idea that Leon was actually a forensic accountant who was currently building a criminal case against him. "That sounds great." "Mom." "We will be there," Carter said. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Marcia Keene. She had sent an image attachment. It was a photo of a notary logbook from a firm across town. Someone had made an appointment for a power of attorney notarization under the name Evelyn Hartwell. Check the signature. Marcia's text read. I zoomed in on the image. The signature at the bottom of the intake form read, Evelyn Hartwell. But the tail of the Y looped the wrong way. It was a forgery? A bad one. I sat at my desk and took out a fresh sheet of paper. I drew a line down the middle. On the left side, I wrote, naive daughter being manipulated. On the right side, I wrote, accomplice. I wanted to believe the left side. I wanted to believe that Carter was the villain and Sloane was just a fool in love. But the evidence was piling up on the right side of the page. I needed one final nail in the coffin before I could shut off the part of my heart that loved her. The final update from Rook and Hallow came in at midnight. It was a video file. The footage showed Carter visiting a self-storage facility on the outskirts of town. He entered a unit and came out 5 minutes later carrying a metal briefcase. He opened it in his car, and the camera caught a clear shot of the contents. It was filled with files, cash, and a passport. The investigators zoomed in on the passport photo. It was Carter's face. But the name printed next to it was not Carter Vance. The name on the passport was Julian Thorne. I closed my laptop. I was not dealing with a greedy son-in-law. I was dealing with a professional identity thief. And my daughter was driving the getaway car. I woke up with the clarity of a demolition expert. I was not going to wait for them to steal my house. I was going to detonate the asset before they could even pick the lock. At 8 a.m, I walked into Diane's office. The coffee was hot, and the paperwork was ready. "Are you sure about this?" Diane asked, her pen hovering over the signature line. "Once we execute this sale to the LLC, the property is no longer in your personal name. It belongs to the trust structure. Do it," I said. "I want that house gone from the registry by noon. If they try to forge a deed in my name tomorrow, I want them to find out they are trying to steal from a ghost." We executed a closed sale. I sold the Isle of Palms beach house to Indigo Horizon Holdings, a limited liability company that I controlled entirely through a blind trust. On paper. The house had been sold to a faceless corporate entity for $3.2 million. In reality, I had just moved the money from my left pocket to my right pocket, but I had burned the pocket they were trying to pick. Then I baited the hook. I picked up my phone and typed a text to Sloane. I chose my words with the precision of a surgeon. "Honey, I have decided. I agree to sign the transfer papers. I just need to sell a few old stocks first to clear the tax liability. Meet me at the beach house tonight." I hit send. Then I called Leon. Trigger the honeypot, I ordered. 10 minutes later, a pending deposit notification appeared in the bank account I knew Sloane was monitoring. It showed an incoming wire of $50,000 labeled Earnest Money Deposit. It was fake, a digital ghost created by Leon to look like a buyer's down payment, but to Sloane and Carter, it would look like cash on the table. I drove down to the coast in silence. When I arrived at the beach house, the team from Rook and Hallow was already there. They were dressed as utility workers. We installed high-definition cameras in the foyer and the dining room. The lead investigator told me quietly, checking his tablet. They are hidden in the smoke detectors. If anyone puts a pen to paper in this house, we will have it in 4K resolution. I sat on the porch and waited. The ocean looked grey and angry. At 6 in the evening, Carter's car pulled into the driveway. Sloane jumped out before the engine even stopped. She looked frantic, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and greed. "Mom," she called out, running up the steps. "We got your text. Are you really ready to sign?" "I think so," I said, forcing a weak smile. "But there is a problem. My notary. She just called to cancel. She has a family emergency. We might have to reschedule for Monday." I watched them closely. This was the test. A normal person would be annoyed. A normal person would say, "Oh well, let's reschedule." Sloane did not look annoyed. She looked relieved. She exchanged a quick, knowing glance with Carter. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "Oh, Mom, don't worry about that," she said, her voice smooth and chillingly calm. "Carter knew you might have trouble finding someone on short notice. So we brought our own notary. He is parking the car right now." I felt the blood drain from my face. They had not just planned to pressure me. They had brought a fake official to witness a fraudulent signature. The trap was set, and they had just walked right into the center of it. The air in the living room was thick enough to choke on. I sat in the high-backed armchair, deliberately slumping my shoulders to make myself look smaller, older, and more defeatable. I pressed a hand to my chest, letting out a breath that was just a little too shaky to be natural. I just want everything to be settled before the wedding," I said, looking down at my hands. My heart has been fluttering again. The doctor says it is stress. I can't handle the upkeep anymore. Sloane was sitting on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. She looked at Carter, then back at me. "We can handle it, Mom," she said, her voice dropping to that practiced tone of concern. "That is why we are here. To take the burden off your shoulders. I was thinking," I continued, dragging the words out. "Since we are doing the paperwork for the beach house, maybe I should transfer the cabin in West Virginia too. I know it is not worth much. Maybe $200,000. But I promised it to you when you were a little girl." Carter's head snapped up. I saw the calculation running behind his eyes like ticker tape. He did not care about the sentimental value. He heard $200,000 and saw another chip to cash in. "The cabin?" Carter asked, trying to sound casual. "Is that the one near the state park? The one with the timber rights?" "Yes," I whispered. "I have the deed right here." I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers. I had planted an old draft of my will on top, with the section about the cabin highlighted in bright yellow. I laid it on the coffee table. It was the cheese in the mousetrap. Carter leaned forward, his eyes locked on the paper. "Well, Evelyn, if you are sure," It makes sense to do it all at once. Save on legal fees. We can handle the management of both properties, I suppose, I said, letting my voice waver. But I need to be careful. I told my lawyer I would only sign in front of a notary. I need to make sure it is legal. We can't wait for your notary. Mom, Sloane said, her patience finally snapping. It is Friday night. Nobody works on the weekend. If we wait until Monday, Carter has to fly out for business. We need to do this now. But who will witness it? I asked, widening my eyes. Sloane checked her watch. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Actually, Mum? The notary we brought. He is parking right now. He is a friend of a friend. Totally licensed. He can handle everything tonight. This was the moment. The trap was sprung. Oh, I said. Well, if he is here. But can we do it in here? The light is better in the living room. I need to see what I am signing. I needed them in the living room because that was where the hidden cameras were angled perfectly to capture the table. Sure, Mum, Sloane said. Whatever makes you comfortable. 2 minutes later, the front door opened. A man walked in. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny and carrying a leather satchel that looked brand new. He introduced himself as Mr. Evans. He did not look like a notary. He looked like someone who hung around racetracks. Good evening, ma'am, he said, pulling a stamp out of his bag. Let's get this sorted out for you. He spread the papers on the table. The fake deed for the beach house. The transfer for the cabin. He uncapped his pen. Carter was practically vibrating with anticipation. Sloane was staring at the pen in my hand. I leaned forward, picking up the pen. I let my hand tremble. I hope I am doing the right thing, I stammered. You are, Evelyn, Carter said, his voice hard. Sign it. Just as the tip of the pen touched the paper, 3 sharp knocks echoed from the front door. Bang, bang, bang. Everyone froze. Carter looked at the door, then at me. Who is that? He hissed. I don't know, I said, dropping the pen. Sloane marched to the door and yanked it open. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch, behind them. I could see the flashing blue lights reflecting off the driveway. Good evening, the taller officer said, his voice carrying into the room. We received a noise complaint from the neighbors. They reported shouting and a potential disturbance. That is ridiculous, Sloane snapped. We are just having a family meeting. There is no noise. We need to verify that everyone here is safe, the officer said, stepping past her into the foyer. He looked at the room, his eyes landing on Mr. Evans, who was frantically trying to shove the stamp back into his bag. Sir, do you live here? The officer asked. No. No. I am just leaving. Mr. Evans stuttered. ID, please, the officer said, holding out his hand. It was a beautiful performance. Diane had called in a favor with the local precinct, reporting a disturbance to give them probable cause to enter. Mr. Evans handed over a driver's license. The officer looked at it, then looked at the notary seal on the table. Sir, the officer said, his voice dropping an octave. This ID says your name is Michael Trent, but this stamp says State of South Carolina, commissioned notary, Robert Evans. Do you want to tell me why you are carrying a forged state seal? I watched the color drain out of Carter's face. It was the exact shade of grey as the stormy ocean outside. My heart wasn't fluttering anymore. It was beating with the steady, powerful rhythm of a war drum. The room turned into a courtroom instantly. Carter, realizing the fake notary was his undoing, switched tactics faster than a chameleon changing colors. He held up his hands, palms open, smiling that oily smile that had fooled me for months. "Officers, this is just a huge misunderstanding," Carter said, his voice smooth. "We are just trying to help Evelyn. She gets confused. Sloane acts on her behalf. We were just trying to expedite the process for her own good." I stood up. I did not look confused. I looked like the person signing the checks. "I am not confused." "Carter," I said clearly, "and I certainly did not ask you to bring a man with a fake rubber stamp into my home." Diane Ketteridge walked in through the open front door, flanked by Leon. She held a tablet in her hand, like a weapon. "We have video footage from 30 minutes ago," Diane announced, tapping the screen. "It shows Mr. Vance handing Ms. Hartwell a sheet of paper with Evelyn's signature practiced on it. He is instructing her on how to replicate the loop of the letter Y. That is conspiracy to commit fraud." Carter's face hardened. He looked at Sloane. "She asked me to help her practice. She is the one who wanted the money." Leon stepped forward. He placed a single sheet of paper on the coffee table next to the fake deed. "The money trail disagrees," Leon said. "We tracked 27 microtransactions over the last 8 months. They go from Evelyn's accounts into Sloane's personal checking. Then, within 24 hours of each deposit, the exact same amount is transferred to an encrypted crypto wallet registered to a shell company in Nevis. We traced the login for that wallet. It is your phone. Carter." Sloane made a sound like a wounded animal. She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. He told me it was for an investment," Sloane sobbed, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. "Mom," he said, if I didn't help him, he would tell everyone about the credit card debt I hid from you. He said he would leave me. He made me do it. It was the performance of her life. She was trying to pivot from accomplice to victim in 3 seconds flat. A part of me, the mother part, wanted to rush over and hug her, but the risk manager in me stayed rooted to the floor. If I comforted her now, she would learn that betraying me carried no cost. "Sloane," I said, my voice steady and dry. "You are 32 years old. You are not a child who broke a vase. You are a woman who helped a stranger rob her mother." Diane moved in on Carter like a shark. She slapped a document onto his chest. "Restraining order," she said, "and a demand for the surrender of all electronic devices pending a federal investigation. Hand over the phone." Carter glared at her. He reached into his pocket, but before he handed the phone over, his thumbs flew across the screen. He was sending one last message. "I am sending it to my lawyer." He sneered. He was not. Rook and Hallow's interceptor box in the van outside caught the packet data. My phone buzzed with the decrypted text forwarded by the investigators. "Destination 904 area code. Message op blown. Burn the files. Evacuate the girl." "It is a ring." The lead investigator radioed into my earpiece. "This is a romance scam syndicate operating out of Jacksonville. They target families with liquid assets. Sloane isn't just a victim. She was being groomed as a recruit." Carter finally handed the phone to the officer. He looked at me, and the mask fell away completely. There was no charm left, only malice. "You think you won?" "Evelyn," he spat. "You think you are so smart, with your cameras and your lawyers. I think I still have my house," I said. "You have this house." Carter laughed. a sharp, barking sound. But you might want to check on your precious cabin in West Virginia. I didn't need you to sign for that one tonight. I sold it 3 weeks ago using the power of attorney Sloan gave me. The buyers are on their way there right now to change the locks. My blood ran cold. The cabin. My sanctuary. That is impossible. I said, You don't have the deed. I have a copy. Carter grinned, showing his teeth. And in West Virginia, possession is 9/10 of the law if the paperwork looks good enough for a county clerk who is half asleep. Good luck evicting them. I looked at Diane. She was already dialing the local sheriff in West Virginia. The war was not over. It had just moved fronts. I drove the SUV like I was outrunning a fire. The speedometer hovered around 80 miles an hour as we cut through the winding mountain roads of West Virginia. Diane sat in the passenger seat, juggling 2 phones and a tablet. The judge just signed the emergency injunction, Diane said, her voice steady despite the sway of the car. We have legal possession. If anyone is in that cabin, they are trespassing. Sloan was in the back seat. She was not crying anymore. She just stared out the window at the passing trees, shivering in her thin silk blouse. We had the local sheriff's deputy following us in a cruiser, his lights flashing silently against the dark pines. We arrived at the cabin at 2 a.m. My headlights swept across the front porch. The first thing I noticed was the shine of new brass on the front door. They had changed the deadbolt. I killed the engine. The silence of the mountains was heavy. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor from down the road, was already standing at the edge of the driveway in her bathrobe, holding a flashlight. Evelyn, she called out, hurrying over. I saw a truck here this afternoon. A moving van. 2 men were carrying boxes inside. I thought you were finally moving out. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. They were not just stealing the property value. They were moving things in. Carter's text had said, burn the files. He wasn't using my cabin as an asset. He was using it as an incinerator. He needed a remote place to destroy the evidence of his other scams before the feds caught up. Stay here, I told Sloan. I ran up the steps with the deputy behind me. He pounded on the door. Sheriff's Department, open up. There was no answer. The deputy kicked the door right below the handle. The wood splintered with a sickening crack, and the door swung open. I did not look at the furniture. I ran straight for the fireplace. My husband had built this cabin with his own hands, and he had installed a wall safe behind a false panel in the wainscoting. It was invisible to the naked eye. But if you knew where to press, it popped open. I suspected Carter had tortured the location out of Sloan, or found it on a blueprint. I pressed the panel. It swung open. The metal door of the safe was mangled, bearing deep scratches from a crowbar. They had tried to pry it, but they had failed to open it fully. I let out a breath I had been holding for hours. It didn't matter if they had opened it. I had moved the bearer bonds and the original deed to a bank vault in Pittsburgh 3 years ago. The safe was empty. Suddenly, a man stepped out of the kitchen, holding a baseball bat. He looked terrified. "Who are you?" he shouted. The deputy had him on the ground in 3 seconds. Handcuffs clicked. "I didn't steal anything," the man yelled, his face pressed against the floorboards. "A guy paid me $500 to sit here and make sure nobody came in. He said he bought the place." "He didn't buy anything," I said coldly. "He hired you to be a squatter." I walked back outside. Sloan had stepped out of the car. She looked at the broken door, then at me. She looked like a ghost. I opened my laptop on the hood of the car. I didn't want to do this, but I needed her to understand that she wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was an architect of her own misery. I pulled up the audio file Rook and Hallow had recorded. "Listen," I said. The recording was clear in the mountain air. Sloane's voice, arrogant and dismissive, drifted from the speakers. "Just do as he says. My mum doesn't suspect a thing." Sloane flinched as if I had slapped her. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking her head. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered. I wanted us to have a start. He promised we would pay you back. You don't pay back theft." "Sloane," I said. "You go to jail for it." Sloane looked down at her feet. She took a ragged breath. "Mum, there is something else," she stammered. "When Carter asked for the collateral, I didn't just give him the cabin info." I stared at her. "What did you give him?" "I gave him the file for the other house," she said. Her voice trembling so hard I could barely hear her. "The townhouse in Charleston. The one you always said was basically mine." I thought since I was the heir, it was okay. I gave him the deed reference numbers. I felt the ground shift under my feet. "Sloane," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "That isn't the cabin. That is a commercial rental property held by a shell company. You didn't give him a vacation home. You gave him the keys to a corporate lawsuit." "I thought it was mine," she cried. "I thought you bought it for me. I didn't buy it for you," I said. "And now, thanks to you, Carter has probably sold a building that doesn't even belong to this family." Sloane looked at me with a mixture of confusion and terror as the blue lights of the police cruisers illuminated the dark driveway. She was still clinging to the idea that the townhouse in Charleston was her safety net, the one asset I had supposedly promised her that Carter had already liquidated for cash. "You don't get it, do you?" I asked, my voice flat. "The townhouse in Charleston was owned by a shell company. I signed the sale papers for that property yesterday morning at 9 o'clock. By the time Carter forged the deed and sold it to his contact at noon, he wasn't stealing from me. He was selling a property that belonged to a commercial real estate firm in Atlanta. That is immediate federal wire fraud." Diane stepped forward, holding up her tablet. She displayed a timeline that looked like a roadmap to prison. "We have everything," Diane said, scrolling through the evidence. "Every text message Carter sent you pressuring you to get the deed. Every email notification you forwarded to him. We have the IP logs of you logging into Evelyn's bank account to approve the test transfers. It is all here. Sloane, you didn't just know. You held the flashlight while he cracked the safe." Carter lunged toward me, his face twisted in a snarl, but the deputy slammed him against the hood of the cruiser. As the metal cuffs clicked around his wrists, Carter started screaming. "She is lying," Carter yelled, spitting on the gravel. "Check her offshore accounts. She is hiding millions. She is the criminal here." Leon Barrows stepped into the light, adjusting his glasses. He looked at Carter with the boredom of a man who had seen too many audits. "Every cent of Ms. Hartwell's assets is declared, taxed, and currently sitting in a blind trust that you will never touch," Leon said. "The only hidden assets here are the ones you tried to siphon into your crypto wallet. We found the private keys on your phone 10 minutes ago." The officers shoved Carter into the back of the car. The door slammed shut, cutting off his profanities. Then, the silence of the mountain returned, leaving only me and my daughter standing in the cold. Sloane looked at the police car, then back at me. She took a step forward, her hands shaking. "Mom, I will testify," she sobbed. "I will tell them everything. But you have to help me. I need a lawyer. I can't go to jail. Please." I looked at her. For 30 years, I had fixed her problems. I had paid the tuition, covered the rent, silenced the mistakes. But a risk manager knows that sometimes the only way to stop a hemorrhage is to apply a tourniquet, even if it hurts. "I am not hiring you a lawyer." "Sloane," I said, "you are going to use the public defender, and you are going to tell the truth, not to save yourself, but because it is the first honest thing you will have done in years." "Why are you doing this?" she cried, falling to her knees in the dirt. "You sold the beach house. You sold everything. You did it just to hurt me." I knelt down, so I was eye level with her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a heavy, quiet resolve. "No, Sloane," I said softly. "I didn't sell the house to get revenge on you. I sold it to cut the rope you tied around your own neck. As long as you thought there was money to be had, you were going to let men like Carter drag you under." I removed the bait. I stood up and signaled to Diane. She pulled a single file from her briefcase. "This is the new trust arrangement," I told Sloane, dropping the file next to her knees. "I have liquidated my estate. The money is in a fund you cannot access. It will pay for a therapist. It will pay for a trade school or a degree. It will pay for a one-bedroom apartment. But it will never pay for a designer bag, a vacation, or a boyfriend's debt ever again. If you want a life, Sloane, you are going to have to build it yourself." I turned and walked back to my car. I did not look back as Sloane signed her statement on the hood of the police cruiser. I sat in the driver's seat and checked my phone. A notification from the broker popped up. "Transaction complete. Funds transferred." I looked at the digital receipt. The houses were gone. The legacy was gone. But for the first time in years, I took a breath that felt entirely my own. I put the car in gear and drove down the mountain, leaving the wreckage in the rearview mirror where it belonged. Thanks for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you guys are tuning in from, so drop a comment below with your city or country to let me know. If you enjoyed this ride, please subscribe to Nora Revenge Stories, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people.